Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Collier with the Open Infra Foundation.
And I'm Jonathan Bryce. It's great to join you at the Open Infra Days Korea today.
We are so excited to be able to participate remotely and definitely hope to get back there in person next year. Now, today we want to talk a little bit about all of the exciting news that's happening around the Open Infra Foundation, talk about how many new members we have, all the new production use cases, how we have more projects than ever. So lots of software getting written, lots of people collaborating around the world. In fact, this Open Infra Foundation we started just this year was the follow-on or successor really to the OpenStack Foundation. So with more software, we have a lot of stories and stats to share about OpenStack, but also other projects that are part of the Open Infra landscape. Now, this community is over 110,000 people like everybody here at this event and events around the world, local communities working on building open source software that runs in production. So as a foundation, that is our focus. We build communities who write software that runs in production, and the community is in over 180 countries. So very global. Collaboration is the key to how we really succeed together and power the world's infrastructure. So one of the ways in which we're connecting, and we have started to connect this year online, is with a weekly show called Open Infra Live. So shortly after we started the Open Infra Foundation, beginning of 2021, we started this weekly show. So all of you can participate. If you go to openinfra.live, you can learn more about it. But this show is really a great way every single week for us to connect live. And we broadcast it on YouTube and also, of course, post the recordings, and 2,000 to 3,000 people connect as part of those episodes every single week. So although we haven't been able to be in person together as much as we'd like this year, this weekly show really gives us a chance to connect. And this is how we come together as a community to write all that great software that runs in production. So speaking of production, we have more Open Infra production than ever. If you look at OpenStack as an example, we just did our recent user survey that we have every year, and it covers OpenStack. We also have user surveys for the other projects. But OpenStack specifically, we saw a huge jump in adoption to 25 million cores in production, up from 15 million cores 1 year ago. So that's a 66% growth. So incredible adoption. And I think we all know that the world has needed more infrastructure, more cloud infrastructure in the past year as more activities have moved online. And that trend has absolutely proven to be the case with OpenStack. So you see that even though the project has been in development for over 11 years, and we've had so many releases on time every year, the software keeps getting better and the adoption continues to grow. And we have over 175, I think we're actually over 180 now, data centers for public clouds. So these are all the infrastructure as a service clouds powered by OpenStack, which is more data centers than any hyperscale public cloud out there. So when you put together the combined power of this ecosystem of all these companies working on OpenStack, bringing it to market, you have, of course, the large private cloud, but also the public cloud market. And just in this user survey, over 100 new clouds were cataloged, meaning people came in, took the survey, and actually, told us how they were using OpenStack and the size of it. And in fact, we now have 7 organizations that we know of that are over 1 million cores in production each. Some of them have several million cores of production. So when you look at this 25 million cores of OpenStack, it really covers all kinds of use cases, right? So you have e-commerce, retail, telecom. 9 out of 10 of the top telecom networks in the world are powered by OpenStack. And so that's billions of people, billions of humans all over the planet that are actually connected by clouds, by networks, mobile networks that are powered by OpenStack. So it's really incredible to see this impact over a decade into this transition since we started the open infrastructure kind of movement, if you will, and OpenStack being the key technology that started it all. And again, we have other projects now that complement OpenStack. We'll talk about in a minute, but academic research, everywhere you look, messaging apps, you see examples of OpenStack in production. And so specifically, I mentioned that we have a bunch of companies now running over 1 million cores in production. And we were so excited about this that we actually launched the Million Core Club. So many of you may remember a few years ago, we had the 100K Core Club, 100,000 cores production. And we now have 7 organizations, and we actually gave them all an award just recently at our big Open Infra Live Keynotes event. So it's exciting to be able to recognize these companies that are investing in bringing OpenStack to production, relying on it for billions of dollars in commerce and connecting billions of people around the world. And to talk a little bit more about some other users that are doing really interesting things with OpenStack in production, I'll throw it over to Jonathan.
Thanks, Mark. We do have so many interesting users who are doing all kinds of interesting use cases, as you mentioned, across many industries. But what I think is exciting is that we have these clouds with over 1 million cores that you talked about, but we also have many organizations who are finding OpenStack to be very valuable and very useful, even at smaller scales. So you mentioned academic and research as one of the industries that people are needing access to a lot of digital infrastructure. And within the Australian research community, there's a research cloud that is a combination of several organizations coming together and building infrastructure, almost 1,000 servers. And it's a deployment that has grown in the last year 140%, and is providing critical compute infrastructure for research in Australia. On the public cloud side, T-Systems in Germany has been a gold member of the Open Infra Foundation and a public cloud provider, especially to the European market with their Open Telecom Cloud. They are able to provide a cloud that meets the data sovereignty requirements of their customer base, and is able to also provide all of the capabilities across infrastructure as a service and container platforms that their users are looking for. And they have thousands of servers providing that public cloud. And a new user that has recently started to build out their infrastructure and modernize it using OpenStack for their cloud is Schwarz, which is a German company that has a number of different retail brands. These are retail stores located across Europe, thousands of them. And obviously, retail is another industry that's going through a digital transformation. It's something where the stores, the distribution centers, and the central offices all need to have much more integration between all of their technology systems. And so Schwarz has started to build out a cloud starting in 2021, and have grown it quite a lot just so far this year. So we love those large clouds, but we also love clouds of all sizes, and love seeing new use cases that come onto the scene. In South Korea, one of the great stories of growth that we've seen is from Kakao. And Kakao has recently come on the Open Infra Live weekly series that Mark talked about, and has been sharing details around their OpenStack growth and their deployment. The Kakao environment is quite large, and recently has grown another 30% year over year. It's deployed in 6 different regions. So this is a cloud that has quite a bit of breadth in terms of where it's built, where it's located, and is now running over 200,000 instances. And when Kakao came on to Open Infra Live, they talked about the approach that they are taking to their infrastructure overall. And this is an approach that we see as really kind of the most common way that people are building clouds now, which is hybrid clouds. They are using public public cloud providers as well as private clouds to make sure that they are meeting all of their various infrastructure needs. And so, in Kakao's case, they are combining their OpenStack private cloud along with resources from AWS, and they are using Kubernetes on top of that. It's another very common theme. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes too. But what's really great about having more users and more clouds and more companies in production is we start to see patterns emerge around the successful implementation of these different technologies. What are these companies doing that's working well, that's allowing their business to grow, and that's allowing them to really meet those needs for the business? And hybrid cloud is definitely one of those patterns. Kubernetes is another one, and again, just a massive growth in the demand for infrastructure overall. We've seen that as well in the user survey, just in the number of new clouds that have come online. And just in this most recent iteration of the survey, we cataloged 100 new OpenStack clouds that were built. Obviously, this isn't every OpenStack cloud that's out there. This is just a sampling of the people who opt into the survey. And we have thousands of clouds cataloged in the survey, with 100 new ones just in the most recent version of it. And some of these are very interesting. Exion is a French organization that is part of the energy company there in France, and they have repurposed previous systems that were kind of at the end of their life, put them in a cloud, and they are giving them new life and allowing a very kind of green and eco-friendly compute environment to be built and delivered throughout their network. And one of the things that's really neat about this is they are measuring the CO2 impact of the workloads that are running in their environment. So this is something that I think it's really important to think about, as we continue to build all of this infrastructure. When does it when do we need to be paying attention to the environmental impact of all of our digital infrastructure, the power consumption, especially the heat generation, and how do we become more aware of that and make sure that we're doing this in a way that we can minimize the harmful impacts and actually reuse things in a beneficial way. We had another really interesting episode of Open Infra Live talking about green data center technologies. Another hosting provider in Switzerland is called Infomaniac, and they have built a really high performant cloud that's in Switzerland there with high performance storage, very high performance compute nodes, and also hardware accelerators, specifically NVIDIA GPUs. So again, this is another public cloud provider who is meeting a need in the market by focusing on performance. And OneCode is yet another public cloud provider that is meeting a need in the Asia Pacific region for gamers who are looking for low latency and consistent network performance. And they are going after this massive $1.5 billion gamer market in the Asia Pacific region by providing a series of data centers that are all well connected and kind of centrally located for gamers throughout the region. So it's great to see when we create these open systems, how we are able to take that and then build cool combinations of technologies like hardware acceleration, put it in places where we can take advantage of network speeds or data locality, and even reuse hardware that might have just been kind of thrown in the trash pile, give it new life, and deliver valuable compute to organizations. I'm going to let Mark talk about the next slide, which gets us back into the public cloud world a little bit and some of the data there.
Yeah, I think it's just incredible, I think, to see the growth of OpenStack powered public clouds a lot of people are more familiar with OpenStack being the de facto standard for private clouds. And you know, a lot of the users we talk about, you think of as being private cloud users. Obviously that growth continues, but the public cloud side of it is really an interesting story. In fact, it's growing so fast, we haven't even been able to keep this map updated because we're over 180 data centers now that we know of that are public clouds powered by OpenStack. And this is really a powerful, I would say, proof point of one of the original visions when we started OpenStack was that the world would have choices, right? Choices if you want to run it your own infrastructure using open source with OpenStack. And if you want to have a lot of different alternative choices in the market, you can actually have many service providers to choose from, all powered by that same exact source code, right? The same software, OpenStack. And if you go to openstack.org/marketplace, you can actually see many of these clouds, and you can go in and find one in your area and go sign up and use OpenStack, by the hour in a traditional as a service kind of public cloud scenario. So this is an awesome kind of, I would say, example of the power of open source to give more choice in the market. And we continue to see more of these coming online every day. And I think next we want to talk about, some other stats around OpenStack and the other projects. One of the things that we see with the user survey is that most of these clouds are in production. No surprise there. People have known about OpenStack for many years. They know it's super reliable and scalable, and it's used to power millions of cores. So you see people, mostly running in production, but we also have some that are still in development phase. If they're wanting to launch, a new cloud, then they're going to turn to OpenStack for that. And then we also saw that, most of these people are running hybrid environments, right? And so they're running OpenStack in some form or fashion, but they're also consuming other clouds. And oftentimes those are based on OpenStack, but also no surprise, you see, the big hyperscale clouds being well represented here as well, whether it's AWS or Azure or Google Compute Engine. So people often will consume lots of different technologies from different companies. So the rise of hybrid cloud, it seems like it's really here. And whether you call it multi-cloud or hybrid cloud, there's always debates about the terminology. But the bottom line is people are adopting all of these different technologies in public, private, and different combinations. And a lot of times that's driven by economics or data locality or performance reasons, latency, et cetera. So having all this open source powered infrastructure gives people more options out there. And we're seeing that in the market. And I think for the next project, we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening with Airship.
Yes, so Airship is a project that we host at the Open Infra Foundation, and this is something that is kind of a newer element of what we have been doing as a foundation. We have begun to expand to host more projects than just the OpenStack project, and that's something that has been very exciting for our team and our community to be part of, because when we look at these environments that people are using for their compute storage and networking infrastructure, there are so many projects, so many open source components that are part of them now. It's really important for us as a community to be thinking in kind of a more holistic way of how do we bring together the right set of tools to solve the challenges for today and that we're going to see over the next decade in infrastructure, and how do we do that with open source? So one of the things that we have done as a foundation is start to support additional projects, and Airship is one of those projects. Airship is a kind of a workload lifecycle management project that combines bare metal containers and virtual machines into a single set of functionality. And what you get when you do that is a really tightly integrated system that can deploy onto physical servers and then manage a number of workloads in a really hands-off way. And Airship just recently had the 2.0 launch of their project earlier this year. And so it's a project that has had some good progress and has really I think been a cool combination of a lot of open source tools coming together. We did a user survey for all of our projects this year, and in the Airship survey, one of the key pieces of data that we saw was that 70% of the survey respondents were running virtualized workloads in Nova, as well as containerized workloads in Kubernetes. And this matches up to what I think we have seen in the broader market. That is really, all of these different types of compute are being widely used, and so we need systems that integrate them and support them together.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier, Jonathan, that people are combining Linux, OpenStack, and Kubernetes for their infrastructure, and I mentioned before that 9 out of the 10 biggest telecoms in the world run OpenStack. So those trends here are really reflected in the Airship project, which does in fact rely on and bring together Linux, OpenStack, and Kubernetes for infrastructure. And it's being used, as you can see here, for a lot of different use cases, but certainly in the telecom world. AT&T, one of the largest, if not the largest telecom companies in the world, running their 4G and 5G networks on Airship. So good examples, I would say, of those trends in production.
Yeah. The next project that we want to talk about is Kata Containers, and Kata Containers was the first project that we hosted in addition to OpenStack. Kata provides a secure and isolated execution environment for container workloads, so it can deploy Docker containers directly, or it can be the execution environment for a Kubernetes pod. And Kata is something that has been around for about 4 years now and has quite a bit of production usage, including some very large deployments at organizations like Baidu. And when we did the user survey with Kata Containers this year, we saw that the majority of respondents are integrating Kata Containers with Kubernetes. They are using it as a backend for executing the Kubernetes pods. Another thing that's interesting about Kata, one of the kind of key use cases for Kata is in serverless workloads. So one of the questions in the Kata user survey was around the types of workloads that people are running. Are they long-lived workloads, kind of like a Kubernetes pod that is always up for delivering a microservice application? Or are they short-lived workloads that maybe is more like a serverless application or a Lambda? And what we found was that most organizations are running a mix of those types of workloads within Kata. And there are about 24% who are only doing long-running workloads, and then about 10% that are doing those very short-lived, less than a minute kind of workloads. So interesting to see the patterns there as people kind of continue to move forward with containers and new types of deployment models like serverless. Third project is Starlingx X. Starlingx X is a very tightly integrated edge computing distribution that again combines Linux, OpenStack, and Kubernetes, and it's used for a lot of different use cases. This was the data from the user survey around what kinds of use cases people are using it for. So multi-access edge computing is the top use case, but there are also other kinds of sort of edge computing use cases like industrial automation within factories and manufacturing facilities, universal CPE for putting connectivity or telecom equipment into different environments, customer premises, and another one that there's a very large use case around is the virtual radio access network. This year, Verizon Wireless announced in the United States that their nationwide 5G virtual radio access network is actually running on top of Starlingx X. It's running on top of the commercial version of Starlingx X from Wind River. And so this is a great production use case for Starlingx X that's a very widely deployed and large-scale production use case.
Yeah, I think, Jonathan, what we're going to see, I'm just guessing here, but I think we're going to see that radio access network use case really grow. It'll be interesting when we do the user survey again next year, because as you said, we see Verizon rolling it into production. And to me, that's like a really interesting example of open infrastructure in production. It's using Starlingx X, which brings OpenStack, Kubernetes, Linux together. So it's really cool use case, and certainly far afield from what we originally thought OpenStack would be used for. And so it's really cool in the Starlingx X context to see like actual radio access networks for 5G connectivity running on this open infrastructure kind of stack. So sorry to interrupt. I get excited about that one because it just kind of blows my mind. We're able to power like really important infrastructure like that with the software, this community's building.
Yeah. And speaking of really important software, the next open source project is Zuul, and Zuul is the kind of CI/CD system that the OpenStack community originally developed to host their code contribution, code review, and code testing processes. That was a very complicated and high volume environment when Zuul was first being written, and so there were a lot of very kind of stringent requirements necessary to meet those needs. And what has happened over the years is that other organizations are finding that Zuul can be really useful to help them build complex software in a safe, reliable way. And one of the industries that we've seen a lot of adoption of Zuul is in the automotive industry. This is another one of those kind of serious workloads that the quality and the overall reliability of the software has huge implications when we start to have autonomous driving and different types of safety critical systems. So it's great to see Zuul that as a project expanding and being used for more use cases, and what we see in the user survey is that Zuul is very widely deployed in production now, with about 70% of the users running Zuul in production. So a lot of cool updates from the projects, a lot of great data that we've gathered with the user surveys. And now we can talk about some other broader open infra trends beyond just looking at the user survey itself.
Yeah, and I think it's starting with, of course, Kubernetes. Everybody loves Kubernetes, and it's widely used in so many different contexts. And this is absolutely the case as well with OpenStack. We talked to OpenStack users. 70% of them are running it, Kubernetes with OpenStack. And so as we've kind of dug into that and tried to understand what are the patterns here, I mean, we've known for a long time that, of course, OpenStack and Kubernetes are complementary. Some people kind of got a little confused in the early days of Kubernetes, thinking somehow like one was going to replace the other, or they were competitive, which was never really the right way to think about it. But we certainly see when we look more closely at how they're being deployed, it's of course OpenStack plus Kubernetes, but also Linux, right? So you put those together and you have this Linux, OpenStack, Kubernetes infrastructure. And we think that this is really the true pattern here that's actually powering so many of these users that we've been talking about.
Yeah, and what is I think really telling about this is that each of these projects has a very strong position in a particular market. Linux is the open source standard for operating systems. OpenStack is the open source standard for cloud infrastructure, and Kubernetes is the open source standard for container orchestration. And that's something that has developed and been established over years and years with each of these projects as their communities have grown and have kind of delivered software on an ongoing basis for years. Linux recently celebrated their 30th anniversary this year. So this is
amazing. And congratulations to the Linux community on that milestone.
Yes, and OpenStack, we're 11 years old now. Kubernetes is around 6 years old. And so over time, as these projects become reliable, stable, something that you can count on, they become really critical pieces of how we build infrastructure. And when you put all of these together, we've kind of coined this term Loki, which is short for
Clever.
Linux OpenStack
Loki
Kubernetes infrastructure. And the thing that is so awesome about this is, there's tons of innovation coming into these communities. We recently had an OpenStack release that 11 years in, still saw thousands of changes from developers all over the world. The Linux kernel is continuing to innovate, and it's not just about a server operating system. It's in phones and cars and household devices, and Kubernetes has continued to grow and innovate as well. In fact, if you add up the changes from these projects, it's around 150,000 changes a year going into these projects. These are projects that have massive amounts of code and innovation coming into them still. Linux, OpenStack, and Kubernetes are 3 of the top 4 most active open source projects in the world. So this is an awesome set of tools to put together an operating system, a cloud platform, and a container orchestration system from great communities who are producing tons of innovation on an ongoing basis. And this is definitely one of the top patterns that we have seen emerge both from our user surveys as well as just the case studies that we hear from organizations.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to note something you mentioned a moment ago about these contribution stats. So if you think about how massive the open source world is today, how many projects there are, how many millions of lines of code there are that's being used to solve all kinds of problems, right? And if you look at all of the entire world of open source, 3 of the top 4 most active open source projects overall are used for infrastructure. So when we talk about the open infrastructure movement, Open Infra Foundation, we talk about kind of why we think infrastructure needs open source. Clearly, the market agrees, because you see more activity in these projects than really almost any project in the world. I think the only other project in the top 4 in terms of just lines of code being merged that's not in this Loki stack, if you will, is Chromium, which is the Chrome OS browser, which is sometimes used for infrastructure, but Linux, OpenStack, Kubernetes, obviously very, very much relied upon for infrastructure. So it just goes to show you that the infrastructure landscape is very, very active. There's so many more problems to solve every year. So each of these communities, they work independently and in solving sort of the domain in which they are the standard. But when you put them together, that's when we really can unlock something really powerful. And what's so important about this is that anyone in the world can run Loki, if you will. The power of this kind of combined technology can be used not just by the largest companies in the world, but also smaller companies and as a service through public cloud. So it's really awesome to see this amount of investment in engineering, kind of collaboration across countries, across companies, and across communities, and even across foundations. Really, any barrier you look at, we can overcome by sort of collaborating across groups and working together. And I think this is a really good proof point for it. And it's really kind of, you would say, the emerging standard in open infra. And even looking at our 25 million cores of OpenStack, most of them are already running this Loki stack. We just kind of coined the phrase by looking at the pattern, and it happens to be memorable. So pretty exciting. And in terms of where the foundation and the community are growing outside of the software and the development side and the adoption, we also just see more companies investing in open infrastructure and becoming members of the Open Infrastructure Foundation. Most notably, a few months ago, Microsoft joined as a platinum member. This is the highest level membership in the Open Infra Foundation. And this is really exciting. I think it just goes to show you that in the world where there's more infrastructure than ever and more open source than ever, that companies that are really interested in investing and solving these hard problems want to do it here in this community, and the foundations play a very important role. And certainly the Open Infra Foundation is one of them that, speaking a little bit biased, but I think that we're bringing together communities who write software that runs in production. Microsoft really recognized that and wanted to be a part of it. So we're excited to have them be part of it. We also have NEPA Cloud, which is the first gold member from Thailand. So we're seeing growth around the world and new members that are coming on to the foundation, as well as a number of new silver members. So across the world, we see more companies that are excited about this software that's getting written. They want to support the development of it, so they're supporting this foundation. And I think that's really, really exciting. And if you look, for example, at NHN Cloud, this is a company that's a public cloud in Korea, and this is another exciting new member of the foundation. So everywhere we look, we see companies that are getting involved. And just since we launched the foundation in January of 2021, we've seen 25% more companies come in and decide to become members and really support the important work of everybody in the community, everybody who's relying on the foundation to organize all this development work and produce this software that we want to run in production. And if any of you have interest in supporting the foundation, you can go to openinfra.dev/join, and it's free for individuals to join. You can be one of those 100,000 people, and then companies can join as silver, gold, platinum. We have information on the website about that. But it's really important work and we're very grateful for all these companies that are allowing us to do it by supporting the Open Infra Foundation.
We also created a new tier, which is the associate member tier, to recognize the work that we do with different academic and research institutions and nonprofits. And we just introduced this a couple of months ago and are excited to have a number of organizations who've already joined, including some notable longtime Open Infra community members like CERN, the group in the Eastern United States with Boston University and UMass and others that are part of the Massachusetts Open Cloud, and some other great open source organizations like CEF, OW2, the Open Source Business Alliance, and others. So this is a great new tier that we have, and it's nice to see the collaboration that's happening across all of these organizations. And speaking of collaboration and projects, we recently announced a new project that is joining our Open Infra Labs community. This project is called Taibai, and it is a multi-cloud management platform. This is a project that was originally developed by FiberHome, and they have worked with us to release it under an open source license and begin building a community around it. And Taibai is targeting that growing area of hybrid and multi-cloud usage by creating a set of tools and interfaces that let you manage infrastructure that may be deployed in kind of a traditional virtualized environment into a private cloud or into a public cloud. This is a problem that a lot of organizations are facing as they continue to grow their cloud environments across different deployments. And so having a system that can unify resource management, security, and authentication is something that I think there's a lot of potential for. And so we're excited to work with FiberHome and the Taibai community to bring this forward. And along with joining the foundation, as Mark said, if there are projects that you know of or that you are interested in building a community for, we'd love to hear from you. We think that these tools are are really valuable and important to bring to the open source community so that we can keep moving the state of the art forward as we carry out our mission over the next decade to build more open infrastructure and get it deployed more widely in more places.
Yeah, and I think, Jonathan, we are very focused as a foundation on, as you said, building communities who write software that runs in production, and more broadly, just getting anybody in the world who has expertise, knowledge, that wants to share about what they're doing with open source that's related in some way to infrastructure. We want to bring them in and have them be part of the process, part of the conversations, whether it's a summit in person or any of the online collaborations that we have, like Open Infra Days like this, or in more recently, we had an expanded Open Infra Live event, which was a couple of days long, and we had one of the engineers from AWS. So this is just example really of how important it is for everyone who's involved in running infrastructure at scale, writing software, to come and be part of the conversation, be part of the collaboration. And this specific conversation was about OpenSearch. So OpenSearch is a very hot topic these days. And we had one of the lead engineers from AWS come on and talk about it. And I don't know, Jonathan, if you want to share any more insights that came out of his talk, but I think as just an example of the kind of broad coalition we're building, and that we want people from every company at every scale to be involved. I think having someone from AWS was a great proof point for that.
Yeah, and the project that Kyle Davis, who's the engineer here, works on is a project that has functionality similar to something that the OpenStack community has used in their development process, but that has become harder to maintain over time. And so the OpenStack PC and the kind of OpenStack development teams are working with the OpenSearch team to stand up an environment that is donated by AWS to help kind of fill that need and provide those resources to the development process.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And as I mentioned earlier, we have this weekly show, Open Infra Live, every Thursday. And one thing I think is important to mention is that if you're not subscribed to the Open Infra Foundation YouTube channel, you should do that, because all of these talks that we've been talking about, the Cacao talk, the AWS OpenSearch talk, how we're collaborating as a community, all of those talks are on the YouTube channel for the Open Infra Foundation. And as we do these weekly shows and do expanded editions of the show, we're always collecting that content, making it freely available. And as I mentioned a moment ago, we recently took the weekly show, Open Infra Live, and produced a much longer, more expanded and in-depth series of episodes. So it was 2 days, and this is all available again on the Open Infra Foundation YouTube channel. But it was called Open Infra Live Keynote. So this just aired. So all of these talks are extremely relevant, and I would encourage you to go out and learn about them. As mentioned, we had presentations from AWS. We had several people from Microsoft on, Red Hat, Vodafone. I mean, we had over 4 hours of conversations, interviews, users talking about their use cases. We talked about this Loki that we described earlier, Linux, OpenStack, Kubernetes infrastructure. And then an important component of this event, and you should definitely look for these segments we called Open Snacks. So these were invitations to contribute to each of the projects that make up kind of this open infra landscape, including Kubernetes and Linux, and as well as all the projects that are hosted at the Open Infra Foundation. So there's so much great information there, and you can also go to this URL and access it directly there, or you can find a lot of these talks, all of them, on the Foundation YouTube channel. Anything to add, Jonathan?
Just that the only thing better than watching the talks on the YouTube channel is coming to the next Open Infra Summit.
Yes, we're getting back together in person.
Yeah. So in June of 2022, we will be holding another in-person Open Infra Summit, and I think we've already heard a lot of excitement in the community. I know that I'm very excited to get everyone back together and be able to see our friends and everyone from all over the world. So the plan is currently to be June 7th to 9th in Berlin. Registration is open now, and sponsorship, you can contact us if you're interested in sponsorship. Information around registration and sponsorship is online at openinfra.dev/summit. And we'll be opening the call for papers in early 2022. So be thinking about what you want to speak about, and hopefully, we will be able to see many of you there and be able to catch up again.
Yeah, so we're excited to be bringing everybody back together in person, and really everything that we've talked about today comes from participation. Whether you're a developer, an operator, a company that's building products, services, public clouds, whatever it is, you have an opportunity to participate, and the foundation's here to help. So as we've mentioned a few times, openinfra.dev is the overall website for the Open Infra Foundation. And we've given you a lot of URLs to remember throughout the talk here today, but you can always just go to openinfra.dev and find all these links. But we have openinfra.dev/join, which again, it's free for individuals to become members of the foundation, and for companies, they can participate and join as silver, gold, or platinum members. We are bringing people together to build the next decade of open infrastructure software and bring it to production, and we want to do it with all of you. And of course, the summit is a great place to talk in person, openinfra.dev/summit. You see the dates here, mark your calendars. Hope all of you can make it to Berlin, Germany. We've had events there in the past. It's a fantastic place to connect, and we want to connect with all of you in person in 2022.
So it's great to have the opportunity to talk with all of you today. Hope the rest of the event is awesome, and we really look forward to the next time that we can get back to Korea and see everyone there. So thank you for having us, and hope you all have a good time with Open Infra.